So this is 20 minutes to 5 in the morning, local time in London on Wednesday, the 12th of May 2021. And this is the continuing the examination diagnosis of Fleet Street of Tuesday as we start looking at the contents of the lying Fleet Street today, Wednesday. But this one warrants a look. This is the one that is absolutely, unbelievably kind of accurately headed. London Libel and Reputation Management. Why? Because this is actually a direct reference. It can be used as a direct reference to what we have discussed many times about the first president of the UK Supreme Court. Now, all these phrases, Supreme Court, the judiciary, etc., should be deemed as being used with the quotation marks around the phrases. And the reason why we use quotation marks around these phrases is because we don't accept the unconditional use of the phrases. That is to say, we don't accept the underlying assumption and the presumption that they are competent, that they are ethical, that they are moral, that they're impartial, they're unbiased, and they're at all engaged in delivering anything to do with justice and fairness and access. So this is also something that fits as a subject area. The propaganda that the first president of the Supreme Court, when he was retiring, boasted about London as being the center of the world's litigation business. And what he was saying, the retiring president of the Supreme Court, in the immediate aftermath of the so-called referendum, staged, it wasn't held, it was staged, it was kind of completely falsified, a false thing. The whole referendum thing was a falsification, a distortion of what is usually peddled as being the system, etc. And he was saying that after the UK left the European Union, London would become the center of the world's litigation business. Now, let's see if we can quickly find this reference at all. If we find it, then it would be interesting to be able to, quote it. Okay, so this is the headline to the piece that is dated the 4th of July 2017, and it is byline to Martin Bentham. And Neuberger, David Neuberger, who had just retired or was about to retire as the first president of the Supreme Court, said that once British judges were left to our own common law devices, that is a direct quote, left to our own common law devices, they would be able to read more, react more quickly and freely to developments in our fast changing world. He also insisted that Britain's departure from the European Union would in no way undermine London's status as the world centre for legal services generally and dispute resolution in particular, and was instead acting as a spur to further improvements. So what Neuberger was saying in that corrupt, absolutely corrupt, criminally irresponsible and untruthful boast that was reported by the London Evening, No Standard, under the heading, Brexit could boost London's status as world's legal centre, Britain's top judge says. Now, that top judge, David Neuberger, was lying. Neuberger was lying, as every single Brexiteer was lying. And the claim made during the Brexit lying propaganda before the actual referendum date, some of the propaganda kind of suggested that this same David Neuberger was a supporter of UK remaining in the European Union. That is absolute plain nonsense. This man was a liar, and he was lying. And he was lying throughout his career. And we shall talk more about the lying later in due course. Now, this is the context. This, what I've shown as being published by the Evening No Standard on the 4th of July 2017, is the immediate previous reference that I'm going to relate to while diagnosing this financial crimes second editorial of Tuesday, the 11th of May 2021, and it is headed, just for the record, exactly. The English courts attract those with deep pockets and much to lose. Now, amazing, isn't it? The English courts attract those with deep pockets and much to lose. That is a complete confession that the courts in England, the English courts, are not for the people who don't have the deep pockets, that is, they are not wealthy and haven't got lots and lots of money to spare and waste. Now, let's read the first paragraph, which says, a tale of the rise of Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, and his ties with oligarchs was always going to be risky, particularly if told in England. Unsurprisingly, lawsuits have been filed in London by 4 Russian businessmen and the country's state-owned energy giant against the publisher HarperCollins and Catherine Belton, the author of Putin's People. The surprise is what took them so long? This implies no criticism of the work of Belton, formerly a Financial Times journalist. Of course, there is no criticism for a Financial Times journalist. It's a criminal confession. Rather, it is an indication of the enduring attractiveness. Notice this one. Notice this one. This is the absolute core of this lying editorial. In the financial crimes, it is an indication of the enduring attractiveness of English courts to those with deep pockets and much to lose. Now, how are the English courts attractive? And what makes the attractiveness enduring? Because it is the world class record of the English judiciary as the most corrupt judiciary in all of the world today, and it has been for the last few hundred years, because the jurisprudence, the actual contents of the pattern of the judges in reasoning and the arguments is complete, stuffed with lying and lies and poisonous deception and denial of universal values and truth. No other court jurisdiction has as long a record of such consistent or persistent criminality in the contents of its jurisprudence. And this is the financial crimes making a confession about the criminality of the English judiciary. By default, they are supposedly talking about Putin and Russia and Russian corruption, but they've slipped in a kind of confession, whether accidentally or idiotically, which is the enduring attractiveness of English courts. I mean, if access to justice, which was the headline peddled during Wolf, so-called Lord Justice Wolf, the Wolf report, if it was to do with access, giving access to people, then it cannot be discussed in terms of people having deep pockets, that is wealthy people, because that by definition is a denial of access, full stop, to those who don't have the money, big money. And Wolf was, of course, part of the corrupt system, and as he was a central part of the corrupt system in his time, which was like 30 years ago, Wolf produced an appropriately corrupt report about access to justice. And when Wolf produced that corrupt report, it didn't shock his contemporaries, his colleagues, who were equally corrupt and in denial. And it didn't create a significant furore among the licensed law trading criminal traders. Because Wolf was actually working in disguise, because his publicly published remit was to find a report improving people's access to remedies through the court system. In fact, actually, it was to do the opposite. His task was to produce something apparently in support of people getting access to remedies through the courts, but in fact, it was a device to decrease people's access to remedies or access to attempts to get remedies through the court system. And the instrument that the recommendations were meant to help get legitimized and treated as plausible and almost compatible with people's rights for access to justice was the legal aid system. The money that licensed law traders, mainly solicitors and barristers, are paid, again, by wrongly labeling the payment and the scheme for payment as being payments to the litigants who are in low income. The litigants are never paid that money. Absolutely never. So it's a brazen untruthfulness, open untruthfulness of the thing called justice system. The system of English justice is the most criminally untruthful assertion and phrase, because the money is paid to the licensed law traders and the litigants are used as weapons, as a tool, as a kind of excuse to enrich the licensed law trading criminals, solicitors and barristers. So Wolf was wrong, and Neuberger, of course, was wrong, as is every single one of the, quote, senior judges who sings the praise of the corrupt, criminal, and racist judiciary in England. Remember, I'm saying England. I'm not even saying Wales, because the numerical majority of the cases are done in English courts, and the highest proportion of members of the so-called judiciary are from England, on English backgrounds, and English-centric and Englishistic backgrounds. So there is no justice in England, not through the court system. Part of the reason why anything that has happened by way of general justice in England has been by way of real campaigns. And the real campaigns are now almost absent, and they will be abolished if the lying cabal fronted by Boris Johnson gets its way and passes repressive legislation restricting even further the access to seeking remedies through the court system for ordinary people. So the people who are billionaires and oligarchs and etc., in countries like Russia are the ones that are going to get any real, lasting, significant kind of access to using the English judicial corruption to have their own complaints and grievances and battles kind of fought away from Russia and away from their own kind of countries. So let's read on the Financial Times, the lying editorial. Lying, contradictory, conflicting, dishonest editorial, ignorant about the judicial corruption and racism that actually dominates the British judiciary, which is actually English-dominated judiciary. England remains a venue of choice for claimants. Absolute lie. It's not a choice that is available to the people in England. That is ever available to the many in the United Kingdom. So that's a lie. And that is also a lie because that choice is not available to most people in Russia who don't have the big money. Most people in other countries who don't have the money. So that's the stupid editorial by the Financial Times. Untruthful, dishonest, but absolutely significant as a reference. So, and it has the audacity to compare the English corrupt court system with that in the USA. It says, unlike in the US, there is no constitutional protection of free speech and fewer requirements for public figures to meet before they can successfully sue. And it doesn't say which country or which countries it is making that statement about, but it applies to the British ones as it does to all the others that come to the British kind of jurisdiction. So it is saying international billionaires. I mean, it is boasting, it's bragging. International billionaires are some of the English legal system. Is admitting English legal system. It's not saying British even. International billionaires are some of the English legal system's best clients. Can you believe that? Anyone who is not in England, who is not in Britain and watching this, whenever they're watching this, this is the diagnosis of financial crimes editorial dated the 11th of May 2021. It's the editorial that is celebrating and peddling the prostitution called the British judiciary being available to billionaires from abroad to come to Britain and spend lots and lots of money paying to lawyers, most of whom, the majority of whom must be, by definition, licensed law traders, solicitors and barristers and legal executives, in other words, based in London. And the headline is London, libel and reputation management. International billionaires are some of the English legal system's best clients. I mean, it's a prostitute's, it's a pimp's kind of phrase. International billionaires are some of the English legal system's best clients. It's not about justice, it's billionaires. And it's not about England and Wales. It's not about British, let alone UK judicial system. It's English legal system, which is in this context and in reality and in truth and on the records and based on the jurisprudence of hundreds of years, a prostitute business, prostituting the terms and phrases of law, judiciary, and all the rest of it. So international billionaires are some of the English legal system's best clients. Their interests are carefully managed from London by a legal industry promoted abroad by the government. Amazing. It is true, the government is the main pimp of the prostitute profession called the legal system in England, in London. As foreign entrepreneurs' stature grows in the UK, reputations have become key assets to defend, not least because relationships with lenders depend on an ostensibly squeaky clean background. So the prostitutes in the court system, court bureaucracy, serve as the cleansers of the reputation, of the tainted reputation of the crooks, also known as the multi-billionaires. Reputation management has enjoyed an evolution beyond public relations firms. Tactics to neutralize criticism are increasingly sinister. Tales of intimidation, from trolling on social media to being surveilled to threats of private prosecution abound among reporters. If libel claims must be resorted to, they can be bolstered by allegations of data protection misuse, over supposed online inaccuracies, even if not libelous, a use of data privacy laws far from their main purpose of safeguarding personal information from big data. New depths were plunged by libel lawyers in 2018 who tried to stop the dissemination in the UK of a book by two Wall Street Journal reporters on the IMDb scandal by using the aggressive strategy of targeting booksellers. The issues go beyond a self-serving argument of a newspaper that reports without fear or favor. How the rich and powerful fight critics matters. Similar tactics are deployed against underfunded advocacy groups and even state law enforcement agencies. Campaigns for measures across the EU limiting so called strategic lawsuits against public participation, known as SLAPPS, deserve to be heard, particularly when being a journalist in Europe can be a deadly business. A simple step to deter any lawsuits designed to silence critics would be to cap costs. This was explored in 2013 during the most recent overhaul of libel laws, but was ultimately shelved beyond tweaks in 2018 around no win, no fee deals. The idea deserves to be dusted off. The cost of defending a libel claim in the English courts with a system that has both solicitors and barristers, and where the loser generally pays the other side's legal costs, can be ruinously expensive. Rich claimants are not put off by costs and can ratchet them up by drawing out proceedings in another intimidatory tactic. By contrast, the prospect of a big legal bill can chill freedom of expressions, particularly among freelancers and small outlets, even if there is a public interest in publishing. Claimants must be able to vindicate their rights in court where claims are well founded. But the courts of these systems hand the super rich an advantage and can distort outcomes. The scales of justice must balance accuracy with greater tolerance of free speech. Without a recalibration, the system could enable privatized censorship. Now, this is too vague and too oblique and too corrupt an editorial, although it is referring to a list of items that need looking into, why it is not recognizing the complete block and barrier to seeking redress by the court system that exists for the most kind of violated and denied and deprived and obstructed members of the ordinary public and society in Britain itself. And of course, there is no question. I mean, it is impossible to imagine a situation where people without money in foreign countries can seek anything like the protection that they are allowed, that the multi-billionaires, crooks from other countries like Russia are allowed through the crooked, prostituted judicial system, bureaucracy in Britain. Now, there is no avenue. I mean, despite the fact that there are, because of the existence of social media, there are many opportunities or many platforms that carry apparent accounts and reports of legal proceedings, unlike in the eras before the appearance of the internet, when the actual proceedings are only available a lot longer after the actual proceedings than can be accessed now. The reality is that the contents of the reports that are available online, including on a number of internet portals that are operated for accessing what used to be called law reports. Despite the fact that they are available on the online and on the internet, the actual arguments and the bias and the criminality of the judges and the judiciary has not actually changed and has not been replaced by anything anywhere near recognizing justice, let alone delivering justice to the many. And what the Financial Times, the crimes, doesn't even mention is the numerical majority of people who are the administrators employed in the court system. Most of those administrators are performing criminality and crimes, and their behavior is the behavior of pimps and prostitutes and liars. And these people deliver and perpetrate persistent racist obstruction. So the actual judiciary post holders are racist obstructors and deniers and abusers, as are the administrators. And this includes the people who are not necessarily of Anglo-Saxon white kind of background. This includes people of Asian and African backgrounds and identities or origins, because they are perpetrating an agenda. They're not personally kind of inventing it, they're perpetrating the agenda. And this perpetration of the racist agenda by the people of African and Asian backgrounds and origins constitutes these African and Asian personnel performing anti-Asian and anti-Afro-Caribbean and African injustice and obstruction and denial of access. Now, wolf has not been referred to in a long while, because his task was, as I said, it was a disguise. His report was a disguise to cover, hide, and conceal the real purpose of his report, which was to create a legitimate sounding or plausible sounding list of reasons for cutting legal aid. And he did the job. And he also came up with a series of measures that restricted access rather than increase the access to justice. And there is nothing in his Wolf's report that produces something that is long overdue, that has been long overdue for hundreds of years. There is no redress that can be sought against the injustice and the corruption and criminality and racism of the existing prostitute court system, from the lowest court to the highest court in terms of hierarchy. There is no height in immorality. So the hierarchy is like the Supreme Court at the top and the county court and the magistrates court at the bottom. In between, there are various court systems like the High Court, etc., the Court of Appeal, etc. Essentially, what it comes to is that all the judges are lying, and what they do is the kind of where they use so-called argument and logic and reason and reference and so on, but they're lying because there is an agenda for each of the case that is formally decided. And the fact that so many of the rulings fall in the category of almost acceptable, such as the ones that they make in the medium courts and the lower courts, does not make the system less corrupt, less racist, less obstructive, less unjust, and less open and accessible. So we shall be going into some of the phrases that the Financial Crimes has used in the second column of this leader opinion, London libel, reputation management, in later parts, in later episodes and later editions of the diagnosis, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. Neuberger was the president in place of the Supreme Court when the Supreme Court staged a ruling critical of the government of Tony Blair. Notice the thing that was in 2017, in January 2017. The actual date was 17th of January 2017, when the Supreme Court, so-called, published the ruling called, the case being referred to as the Belhaj case. The Belhaj case I will come to refer to again in context of the corrupt mayor of Newham, still in place at the time of my challenge to him online on the 14th of March 2018. Belhaj case. Now, the Belhaj case I referred to in the context of its containing a positive, a favorable citation or quotation of a part of the Magna Carta, where it referred to a person's freedom. And I shall actually find the quote during this edition and read that. Let's see if we can find it. That's what we are actually examining, still examining. So Belhaj case we are looking at. So this is the Belhaj case. And we shall be looking at Belhaj. And it says the UK Supreme Court, UKSC, is the website that we are retrieving the item from. So that's the reference we are citing expressly and transparently as we are doing it. And the Belhaj has got a okay, so the case was an appeal. This one was published on the 17th of January 2017, and it was a judgment made in response to the appeal on the case 2014 EWCA SIB 1394 and 2014 EWHC 3846 Queen's Bench Division. Now let's see what the specific Magna Carta. Okay. So it was Neuberger who actually read out the Supreme Court's ruling in the Belhaj case. The Belhaj case itself was about Belhaj being tortured by Jack Straw's regime, as the racist anti-Muslim liar was the foreign secretary in the Belayar's cabinet at the time. So the paragraph 98 of this judgment in the Belhaj case says, the critical point in this is David Neuberger. Neuberger was the president at the time, 17th of January 2017, when this ruling was dated and published. The critical point in my view is the nature and seriousness of the misconduct by the UK state, that is Jack Straw, in the Belayar cabinet. Jack Straw is the foreign secretary. So the seriousness of the misconduct alleged in both cases before the Supreme Court, at however high a level it may have been authorized. So there is an implied deference to the height of the level of the authorization, which means that the height of the authorizing kind of decision maker somehow entitles them to be unfair and unjust. But the appearance is that that is not being suggested, but that is being admitted as being the prevalent kind of status quo. Act of state is and remains essentially a domestic law doctrine. And it is English law which sets its limits. English law recognizes the existence of fundamental rights, some long-standing, others more recently developed. Among the most long-standing and fundamental are these represented in Magna Carta 1225, that is 1225, Article 29, which reads, no free man shall be taken or imprisoned or dispossessed of his liberties, or be outlawed or exiled, or in any way destroyed, nor will we condemn him, nor will we commit him to prison, excepting by the legal judgment of his peers, or by the laws of the land. To none will we sell, to none will we deny, to none will we delay right or justice. Now that is absolutely clear kind of appearance of the Supreme Court in January 2017 saying that it recognized rights, and it recognized all these other entitlements of the free man, that is the ordinary person. But the ordinary person is not. The ordinary person is not given those rights in practice by the very court system that Neuberger was representing and occupying a post in at the top of. Now, when I spoke to Robin Wales at a completely unprepared kind of encounter, because I had not been given any notice about the meeting online, on air, but the meeting took place as a result of a request that I received from the particular presenter of the program at the time on the 14th of March 2018. So when I asked Robin Wales about the ability, the entitlement to challenge the unjust policies of the Thatcher government in introducing various severe limitations and controls on housing kind of expansion or making housing available to people, I did that by citing this particular judgment and this particular section reference to the Magna Carta. And I extrapolated that to apply to an entitlement to challenge unjust behavior, misconduct by the state. And I asked Robin Wales if he had applied to the court system to challenge the Thatcher government or the Conservative government's anti-social and anti-rights, anti-justice, if you like, provisions in terms of housing and any other related provisions by implication. Robin Wales didn't answer straightforward. He said he didn't because he was advised not to. Now, the depth of my knowledge and familiarity with the legal process and system is obvious in my ability to refer to this kind of document and material at a online kind of encounter with Robin Wales without me having any notes, any scripts or anything. So any intelligent observer of the exchange would have concluded that I was fully aware of what I was talking about, and Robin Wales was not, because I had to put that to him repeatedly, at least more than once, that he had to give me the legal advice. He said that he was advised legally not to sue the government, challenge the government in the court system. And my question was actually in the framework of the constitutional entitlement and rights to challenge the government, the rights that are said to be available to the ordinary member of society. And Wales said they didn't. And Wales didn't say that he, as the incumbent in the post of mayor, executive mayor, elected mayor, he didn't say that he, as the incumbent post holder, had a say in ignoring or overlooking or overruling any advice that advised him not to proceed with the constitutional law challenge against the government policy concerned. He put it in a vague way, and he said that he didn't say anything. He never says anything, he said on the program on the 14th of March 2018. He said, I never say anything that I cannot back up. Now let me see what Robin Wales actually said. You bear with me and you see what I'm saying. I'm giving the chapter and verse of everything and sourcing what I'm saying. And sourcing what I'm saying, even though I said it, I'm going back evidentially to find the actual reference. So in this search on what he said, I've got all right. This is the item that we tweeted on the 23rd of June 2018, which is March, April, May, June. So just 4 calendar months after he said it. So this is the Twitter thread that we published in June 2018, contextually noting that Khan confirmed 4 million grant to Haringe Council. More on this later. And then we say that yes, local councils such as Newham have been lying on housing, as Robin Wales did habitually. This is dated the 23rd of June 2018. This is the Khoodeelaar tweet. As Robin Wales did on the 14th of March 2018, 2 days before his deselection was confirmed. More on robbing Wales lies next. Robbing is the name that we gave to Robin Wales because of his robbing the poor, robbing the disenfranchised, and robbing the discriminated against. So that is what contains the actual details. And he said, I never say things or I never say anything that I can't back up. He says, I never, and he says he cannot back up. That is, he never said anything that he could not back up, and he never backed up. So this was one of the threads, one of the many threads that we have posted subsequent to that, saying that Robin Wales lied because he said that he would send the copy of the legal advice that he received to the program. And outside, after the kind of program ended, he gave me an email address which he claimed was the only address that he actually checked, as opposed to the email address called mayor@newham.gov.co.uk. He said that one, Newham Council portal-based email address, he didn't check, but he checked another one that he gave. I'm not giving that one personally on this one, on this program, but he did give me that. So I used that one in good faith, believing that he told the truth, that he did check that one. So I waited for him to send me the copy, which he promised he would do. And when he didn't send me the copy of the so-called legal advice, I had to remind him. And I had to remind him, and I had to remind him, and I had to remind him. And that liar became a liar again based on the lies. He never sent me the thing that he said existed. Months later, when I contacted the so-called democratic service personnel in Newham Council, including a detailed account of Robin Wales's lies and promises, I was sent an email, or more than one, on behalf of Newham Council by the democratic service personnel concerned, saying words to the effect that they didn't have anything from Robin Wales's time because he was no longer in post. And the point I make, and I have made about this, is that Robin Wales, when he appeared on that program, he may have appeared personally, but the claims he made about the council, his administration, those claims were about the council's records. And if he said to me on air, live on the program, that he never said anything that he couldn't back up, that is, backup is the central kind of assertion, then he should have been able to be checked and audited and held accountable for making the claim of backing up, that is an archive, record, access. And he never said it's conditionally. He never said that I'm making a personal point. He said, as the mayor in post at the London Borough of Newham, he was given advice as the mayor. And he also said that he was advised by staff in post or paid in the name of the legal kind of service that the Newham Council was using or abusing. So it's all to do with actual legal record and backup. He never backed up. So when the Financial Crimes writes this editorial about reputation management, it says rich claimants are not put off by costs and can ratchet them up. That is, actually make the engagement more costly by drawing out proceedings in another intimidatory tactic. That rich claimants who use the prostitute courts or which use the courts as the prostitutes, they can make the engagement even longer and more costly for the other party by protracting the confrontation. It's nothing to do with the people, ordinary people, needing justice, orders for the council to deliver housing services, etc., etc. And when I said to Robin Wales about the Magna Carta, that bit about no free man, which includes free woman as well, in the context of the centuries-old kind of age of the quotation, because at that time, hundreds of years ago, women were not recognized as women, as equal as men, but were included in the general provision. So when it says, in the Magna Carta, 1225, Article 29, no free man shall be taken or imprisoned or dispossessed. Wales could use dispossession, the dispossession from housing rights and housing, and the large increasing numbers of people in Newham being sent outside of Newham by Newham Council's policies and behavior. Robin Wales was lying on all those levels because he blamed the legal advice rather than the Newham Council. He blamed the legal advice for not taking action against the conservative government. But actually, what was happening, the conservative government's policy was already bad, making life bad, unbearable, hard for the people affected by the housing, lack of housing rights and removal of housing rights and housing services. But that position was being aggravated, made many times worse by Newham Council imposing its own draconian, oppressive, prejudiced, biased policy of forcing people to leave Newham. Because one of the other statements that Robin Wales had said before he appeared on that program was that if you can't afford to live in Newham, you can't afford to live in Newham. Now, that was something that I did not dwell on, but I was very conscious of that as well. Let me see if we can find that one. And Robin Wales said, so what makes the life of ordinary people in a borough like Newham, with an elected mayor like Robin Wales or Roxana Fiers, is that the local political party, which is the Labour Party, is totally corrupt and is hundreds of miles away from anything like what I was putting to Robin Wales. No councillor in the 16 years that Robin Wales was in post as the elected mayor in Newham. Not a single councillor in 16 years put 1% of the content and the quality and the substance of what I put to him during that half an hour of exchange. And that means that ordinary people who are neither the average ordinary people in Newham are not politically conscious, not in the way that they can confront a liar like Robin Wales. They're not even capable of challenging a lying employee in the council. And the Labour Party is numerically, demographically dominant in Newham. So therefore the councillors, whatever they may personally think or say privately about the council's behavior, never, ever make a statement in public, even concerning the possibility of Newham Council employees being oppressive, unfair, and cruel to people who are entitled to the particular services of the council at the time of the perpetration of the criminality. So, for example, when, as I've said before, but this is justifiable reference again, when the United Nations so-called rapporteur, that is to say, the kind of expert on poverty and homelessness or housing, visited the UK in October 2018. One of the 9 or 10 public gatherings that he attended included one held in the Barking Road in the Canning Town area in Newham. And I think that the meeting he actually attended was dated the 12th of October. Is it October or November? We can check and we shall update accordingly when we finish this. And the updates normally appear on our Twitter account and the Facebook accounts. We have other accounts associated with this campaign, but the main ones are Khoodeelaar account on Facebook and the Khoodeelaar Twitter account. And we update things as much as we can. that are discussed or contained in the broadcast, and also those that are referred to but not expressly for understanding. So this program, this campaigning program, world exclusive program, is designed to supersede any program that is available either academically at any university or university equivalent, and of course anything operated by any media platform anywhere, mainstream, substream, whatever, including the biggest ones in North America and Western Europe, in terms of the dominance they have because of colonialism and other economic corruption over the world markets and world economic relationships among countries and nations and populations. So this is a unique program, unique platform because of the contents and because of the remits and because of the expanse of what we discuss and cover and imply. So we want to be absolutely factual and verifiable and transparent. That's why we try as best as we can to include as many references and clues, explanations, clarifications afterwards and prior to a particular broadcast. And then we do the transcript, we edit the transcript and publish, and we intend to publish more and more of the excerpts of the contents of the transcripts. And we do that at probably the fastest speed and rate currently available. So we are doing this as an internationally defined educational exercise, sharing knowledge that is absolutely verifiable and truthful and very practical and useful for people objectively. It's not a career, it's not a business, it's not a commerce. And the big money people, including the owners of the majority shares in the big American corporations, media terms, like Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and the South Africa-born Elon Musk, and Bill Gates and their likes, they don't have anything on offer from their organizations. And between them, they're not billionaires, they're trillionaires. And we have the opposite. We haven't got any comparable resources to even mention in contrast. But we have the higher resources of benevolence, kindness, and independent knowledge compared to all of them put together. So that's what we're sharing. And we don't have followers and we don't have friends. That doesn't make us less accessible, remember? It's a intentional choice that we have made about this campaign and these associated platforms. We don't want friends because most of the friends on the internet are not engaged in a way that is compatible with our activities or our values. And there will be diversions and there will be waste of time. And that is not conducive to our keeping the flow and the continuation of the focus on the evidence, on the morality, and the importance of ethics and universality and accountability and transparency. Think about these values. These are not slogans for us. These are real terms and real time. So we go back to the meeting that Philip Alston, an Australian-born, an Australian-schooled law academic, Okay. So this is the news item. Yes, it was November, not in October. Philip Alston actually visited Newham on the 12th of November 2018, not in October 2018. And here is one of the online reports that were published about this meeting. And the reports were published dated the 13th of November. And this one was published on the 13th of November on the independent.co.uk website. And it's a person called May Bullman. May Bullman was the person whose name appeared as the author of this one. And it describes her as social affairs correspondent, May Bullman. And it was on Tuesday, 13th of November 2018, at 1:59 p.m. in London local time. That is, the equivalent GMT time would be 13:59 hours GMT on Tuesday, the 13th of November 2018. Was there any comment on this? There appears to be no comment accompanying that piece. Now, this is important. I'll come to that shortly. So the piece is headlined or headed as follows. The piece is headed, Mother describes being forced to drink her baby's milk. Notice that. Mother describes being forced to drink her baby's milk as people living with poverty come forward to tell United Nations envoy their stories. And the subheading was, I was in my slippers. It was so cold. I plucked up the courage to ask them, to say, I am hungry. I have a baby, but they said, we can't give you anything. I had to drink my baby's milk. Now that is the mother referring to they who are the employees in the Newham Council. And this picture, there is a picture underneath that headline and subheading that shows Roxana Fiaz speaking on the mic. And as she stood in front of three people on the table, at the center of the row of seats is the man, Philip Alston, the Australian-born law academic employed by the University of New York in the USA, Philip Alston. So May Bullman, who's the reporter, says in the first paragraph, the first substantive paragraph in that item online on the independent.co.uk, people suffering extreme levels of deprivation in London have told the United Nations Poverty Envoy how government inflicted austerity has left them homeless, hungry, and at times forced into exploitation. Now that is a paragraph which must have been put there by the editors of the Independent, because the cruelty that this woman detailed and reported was not anything to do with the government imposed, inflicted austerity. It was the degenerate, inhuman attitude of council employees in Newham. A very significant element there, because no matter what the amount of cuts that the central government can be accused of imposing or inflicting. The behavior, the cruel behavior, lack of empathy, and the abuse of the position held by an employee in the council, while they had the power to help a person in the position of that mother, and they said they could not help. Any humane person in that position being asked for help by a mother like that should have and would have said, okay, here is 1 quid, 1 pound, 2 pound, 3 pounds, whatever. And they didn't have to say, we can't help you. We can't do anything for you. That's the level of inhumanity, the level of cruelty that Roxana Fayez and before her, Robin Wales, colluded in, tolerated, encouraged, and supported and justified. And I'll say all of that again while discussing Roxana Fayez's role after that now. The next paragraph in the May Bullman piece says, during a packed out meeting in Newham, East London, Philip Alston heard directly from migrant women, people with disabilities, and domestic abuse survivors who gave personal accounts of how welfare cuts had affected them. Again, that is an editorial, absolutely editorial lie, because this woman's account is not about welfare cuts, because welfare cuts takes the responsibility away from Newham Council and attaches it to unidentifiable collective image of the central government. Whereas Roxana Fayez was there, present there, and those criminals who perpetrated the cruelty were identifiable. So the next paragraph of May Bullman's piece says, in one highly charged account, a West African mother with a baby strapped to her back explained through tears how she had to wait for 20 hours outside social services, that is Newham Council's social services, after fleeing an abusive relationship during which she became so hungry she had to drink her child's milk. Other stories included a mentally unwell man who was fined for making a mistake on his universal credit application, families with young children forced to live in flea-infested houses, and a heavily pregnant woman having to sleep rough in a park. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights visited one of the poorest boroughs in the capital as part of his 2-week tour of Britain to investigate the impact of the rollout of universal credit, child poverty, and Brexit on people living there. His visit comes after experts warned the United Kingdom had experienced the largest rise in poverty since Margaret Thatcher was in power. An increase believed to show the extent to which a combination of Brexit and government austerity is imposing a serious squeeze on living standards. Anyone watching this will notice that all of these paragraphs are written in a way that focuses on the UK central government, which can be blamed and accused of doing a lot of damage and harm to the rights of the people. But to blame all of these on the central government and to excuse the local government is a criminality itself. Because the central government only controls the money. It does not direct people in place in boroughs like Newham to behave cruelly to people. That is not simply possible in the allocation business. But the independent and Mayor Bullman were being dishonest and corrupt and criminally untruthful in writing it that way. And let's see. And they're promoting the local people. Like this woman, Jane Williams, of the Magpie Project, which is completely overly hyped as a Newham charity. Because Magpie Project doesn't condemn the cruelty and criminality of the personnel in place in Newham Council as their employees. It doesn't. So it's complicit. The Magpie Project is complicit with the criminality of the mayor-infested Newham Council regime. So in that piece, which we shall come to again after referring to Roxana Fiers, that independent is part of the Fleet Street that we diagnose, world exclusive diagnosis. And that is the kind of example of what we mean to say when we say the entirety of Fleet Street is corrupt. This is a corrupt piece about a very delicate and very serious, emotionally charged issue and phenomenon that is going on in Britain. Now, people outside of the UK and internationally are misled by the United Nations and its own bureaucracies into assuming that society and democracy in a country like Britain are being served by democracy. And this is the example that it is not. It is far from that. It's completely the opposite. A mother who has escaped or fled an abusive relationship and left and went to the local council social services, and they don't mention Newham Council at all. There's a council. It's not the same thing. You have to be exact and identify which council was misconducting, misbehaving. And throughout the writing of Mayor Bullman, there is this theme of collaboration and collusion and complicity with the crooks and liars and cruelty inflictors of Newham Council. So compared to the abusive relationship abuser, how less abusive were these criminals that forced this mother to have to survive by drinking the milk that was meant for her own child that she was carrying on her back. Now, at that meeting, as this report later says, Roxana Fiers apologized for the behavior of these people, the cruel behavior of these people to this mother. But you see, this is not a spontaneous kind of apology by Roxana Fiers. Roxana Fiers was lying because although the mother has not been followed up or tracked, and as far as we know, she has not been kind of reported to have given any update on her experience and relationship or contacts with the Newham Council. The behavior of persons in the housing, because that was the social services. So the social services, the housing personnel are very similar, very related to one another. And remember the duties that the Tower Hamlets Council neglected to deliver and discharged to help the four girls from Bethnal Green School are duties that are included in a list of duties that local councils owe to the people in the borough covered by the council's boundaries. So, when the Newham Council was obliged to help the mother in a vulnerable position on many levels, emotionally vulnerable and probably physically vulnerable as well, because the abuser might have turned up, or she might have been attacked or be vulnerable to other attacks by other people in the street. And that was typical Newham Council behavior. Because while Robin Wales was in post, there were many accounts of people being forced to leave Newham. Now, this report was being made in November 2018, which is a few months after Roxana Fiaz replaced Robin Wales as incumbent holder of the corrupt post of executive mayor in the name of Newham. So it didn't say in the report by Mayor Bullman what date this incident happened. This incident meaning the mother waiting for 20 hours and being forced to survive by drinking the milk meant for her child because the Newham Council employees said that they couldn't help her. They bluntly told her they couldn't help her. Now that was the social services. All the media and all the propaganda elements will tell you that the social services are there to provide social service. Now that was social, antisocial, oppression, disservice, cruelty that was being dished out to this mother by the Newham Council social services staff. And we shall talk later, not necessarily in this edition, but we shall talk later in other later editions about the role of Labour Party councillors in Newham in perpetuating and perpetrating collusion and complicity and cruelty against mothers like that, against individuals like that man who was attacked, and other people who absolutely on the evidence deserve urgent, humane solidarity and humanity and compassion and support, but are deprived of that by Newham Council. So victims like that mother, like that man, are oppressed to a point where they are pushed to the edge by the additional authoritarian, oppressive, unkind, hurtful, heartless attitude of Newham Council social services employees and their likes across the Newham Council itself, the whole Newham Council's permanent employees placed at the front line of contacts with people in the most vulnerable positions and people needing the highest level of compassion, solidarity, and support. Now, we have examined the behavior of Lutfur Rahman, who was incumbent in the corrupt post of elected mayor in Tower Hamlets between the date late October 2010 when he got inflicted as the elected mayor incumbent. He was inflicted on the people of Tower Hamlets in October 2010 until he was kicked out on the 23rd of April 2015 by the election commissioner, Richard Morey. Between those kind of periods, the dates like October. One of the entries says that the election so-called took place on the 21st of October. It could be 21st or 23rd. We shall check that one. So say it was the 21st of October or the 23rd of October, whenever it was. It was the last 10 days of October that the so-called election was inflicted on the people of Tower Hamlets, 2010. And between that date and the date when he was ousted, kicked out, literally kicked out by the order issued by Richard Morey, the election commissioner, Lutfur Rahman committed serial offenses, and he perpetrated serial lies and lying and falsehood and disinformation and abuse, etc., etc. Now, we have been elaborating on that, and we've been doing that as part of the factual advice, notionally to voters that were going to vote at the so-called referendum on Thursday, the 6th of May, 2021. And we were doing that in support of the need to get rid of this corrupt elected mayor post. First of all, the post is corrupt. Secondly, the post is corrupting. And the third is the post holder is corrupt. That applies to John Biggs. That applies to Lutfur Rahman. That applies to Roxana Fiaz. That applies to Robin Wales. And that applies to the whoever is incumbent in Newham in the same post. And it applies to the incumbent in the same post in Lewisham. These are the 4 London boroughs that are kind of lumbered with this corrupt and corrupting post and the corrupt post holder in each of their cases. Now, anyone reading from abroad or reading from outside or reading from the Mars and outer space about or wanting to find out about, reading or wanting to find out about what is going on in Tower Hamlets in the East End of London, most often and frequently described as one of England's most deprived boroughs, would want to know how the deprivation takes place and whether the deprivation is intentionally inflicted on the population or it is avoidable. Our answer, on the basis of facts and evidence, is that both Newham and Tower Hamlets fall into this, broadly speaking, same similar kind of background and category. Financially, the people are in low income in a great deal of cases. And people are in other categories needing support of the official providers of service and support. That is the first call, port of call is the local council social services. And as the evidence of that meeting, as recounted by Mayor Bullman in The Independent, that meeting took place on the 12th of November 2018, and Mayor Bullman's speech appeared on the 13th of November 2018. At one point, Roxana Fiaz stood up and apologized. That let's go into that part of the meeting. There is a lot of description in the Mayor Bullman report before it comes to Roxana Fiaz. Mayor Bullman wrote, another woman told how she fled her home country in Africa because her uncle was raping her, but received no support on arriving in Britain, with her baby and was subsequently forced to live with a man who sexually abused her, and because he was prepared to house them. When she finally left him, she said she was given no help from the council. And Bullman doesn't mention Neom Council. She is absolutely committing a crime by withholding the name of the Neom Council. That is the sickness on the part of the Independent, the Guardian, and others in Fleet Street. And she continued and then says, Mr. Alston also heard stories of mentally and physically disabled people who had been hounded by the Department for Work and Pension every day. But it doesn't say what hounding the Neom Council is doing. It doesn't mention Neom Council as the hounder and the attacker. And there are many accounts, and we shall come to. Now, she comes at the very end of this stupid report. It's stupid because of the heavy editorial kind of manipulation of the facts, so that she can put Neom Council in the best possible light, even after all this evidence. Writes Mayor Bullman, after hearing the witness statements, Neom's mayor, Roxana Fiaz, said, "Can I just apologize on behalf of myself as mayor of Neom and on behalf of the council that you experienced that treatment at the hands of people that we employ? It should not have happened." Now that was a stunt that Neom Mayor Roxana Fiaz staged. And it continued, the quote continues, attributed to Roxana Fiaz. This treatment of our residents, regardless of their circumstances, their backgrounds, of how long they have been here, has to stop. It didn't stop, it hasn't stopped. But we shall come to that after reading the bit that she says, Bullman says about Alston. Closing the meeting, Philip Alston said, the accounts had really exemplified the dramatic challenges so many are confronted with today. Now that is the stupidest possible use of the adjective dramatic. It was not dramatic. These are oppression, violations, crimes. And this idiot, this racist criminal, Alston says dramatic. It was like how could dramatic be used here? Somebody being starved by the social services is not dramatic. It's starvation. Anyway, so Philip Alston is like that throughout, and I will update on his final report about the visits. Not just in the UK, he visited some other countries during this so-called fact-finding. And let me say again, Philip Alston is an Australian-born and Australian-schooled racist, liar, and imperialist. And he's a colluder and a crook who capitulates to the crooked regimes represented by the likes of the Guardian and the Independent and the Labour Party, let's say. Because his report does not address the prostitute courts in England and the absence of any remedies against corrupt and cruel and illegal council regimes and social services regime or central government regimes at the deprivation, want and poverty creation or DWP. The liar completely ignored the evidence of most of the failings and failing parts of the UK state and the absence of any remedies. Now, when Rukhsana Fayaz was told about series of crimes being currently committed by Newham Council employed personnel in the housing so-called section, Rukhsana Fayaz totally maintained radio silence and refused to reply or respond to any of the factual, repeated accounts and reports and complaints and demands. And Rukhsana Fayaz was not alone. Her deputy mayor, the white kind of source of her advice, John Gray, a racist trade unionist belonging to one trade union that is quite influential in town councils, and he is an employee in Tower Hamlets. John Gray was appointed housing deputy mayor in charge of housing. And Gray denied as well. John Gray refused to acknowledge the evidence, let alone do anything about the evidence. And as we have said before, the statement that Rukhsana Fayaz made in front of Philip Alston was a stunt intended to get her that mention in the Independent and to make her come across as being concerned and caring. Rukhsana Fayaz is as poisonous a liar as Robin Wales or anybody else, or Lutfur Rahman or John Meeks. And Rukhsana Fayaz is as cruel ordinarily as those cruel, unidentified, unnamed individual employees in the Newham Council. Why? Because after that so-called apology and comment that Mayor Bullman reports her as having made at that meeting held in Canning Town on the 12th of November 2018, Rukhsana Fayaz has issued several statements congratulating all the Newham Council employees. Not once, many times. So what of her apology? The answer is that she was not apologizing. She was limiting damages to the reputation of her regime as the mayor in place in Newham Council. Like this one: London Libel and Reputation Management. In the Financial Times second editorial of Tuesday, 11th of May 2021, Rukhsana Fayaz was limiting the damage to her reputation. And as the result of the 6th of May 2021 so-called referendum on the future of the elected mayor post in Newham shows, she successfully maintained the lying collaboration by the councillors with her. And there was no real campaign against the mayor system, because the campaign, any campaign, to have the basic appeal has to have evidence about wrongdoing by the target of the campaign. There was no evidence. Because it looks like Newham Council has been relegated into the darkest of the dark ages, where there is nobody among the public, among the electors, who is able to do anything, highlighting the corruption of the council, the illegality of the council, the abuse of the councils, and the lying of the council that are destroying individuals' lives, families' lives and are allowing the series of criminality, including murders among young black people, taking place. So therefore the votes were cast by people, whoever cast the votes. Well, I cast the votes in wherever I did in my capacity as a single voter against the mayor system. But I would have been in Tower Hamlets and in Newham, both boroughs, I would have been among the minority in terms of numbers who voted to scrap the elected mayor post. And I would have done that as a minority because I would have been convinced by the evidence that mayor system is the most inappropriate system to have in a council. But the overwhelming majority voted to keep the system. Now that is Newham and Tower Hamlets to be counted as among the gullibles. In this case, brainwashed, ignorant, zombified morons. And who are the morons? Many of the people in Tower Hamlets who have voted to keep the mayor system are evidently regular worshippers at the East London Mosque and other mosques that are situated across Tower Hamlets. But these are morons. They may say their prayers, but when it comes to voting, they were influenced by a series of lies foisted on them because they're Muslim, and they are told that they had to vote for a mayor system so that the corrupt mayor, Lutfur Rahman, who was ousted by Richard Morey on the 23rd of April 2015, can return to that post. And anyone who says that they campaigned against the mayor system as part of the four-party or all-party kind of alliance against mayor system is lying, because they didn't campaign. Because if they did campaign, there would be absolutely, without a doubt, votes in Tower Hamlets against the mayor system. So those liars are responsible, and we shall not name them personally out of our generosity and kindness, but we shall name and describe the lies and wrongs and falsehoods that they have perpetrated by pretending to be at all campaigning against the mayor system. And we shall be identifying these criminals by the crimes. And the criminals are of all backgrounds: Europeans, Bangladeshis, Silotis, Muslim, Christians, Jewish. We shall be continuing a few hours later, I think. This is 0630 GMT in London, within quotes UK. And this is the date 12th of